Calvin Cambridge and his best friends, Murph and Reg Stevens, are playing basketball outside their home, the Chesterfield Group home for orphans. They're soon interrupted by Ox and his group of bullies. Ox challenges Calvin to a shooting contest, and when Calvin misses, Ox humiliates him in front of everyone by tearing his jersey. But Calvin refuses to let the teasing bring him down. He proudly declares that one day, families will be lining up to adopt him. He even compares orphans to great people like Moses and Nelson Mandela. Ox and his friends just laugh, mocking the idea that Calvin has any chance of being adopted. Stan Biddleman, a caretaker at the home, arrives and tells the kids to get ready to sell candy outside the Staples Center, where the LA Knights play every Saturday. While selling candy, Calvin and Murph watch the Knights game through TVs set up outside the arena. They're disappointed to see star player Tracy Reynolds miss an important shot. After the game, Calvin spots Coach Wagner and boldly points out the team's mistakes. Wagner is impressed and offers to buy some candy. But Calvin turns him down, unsure if the money even goes to help the group home. Wagner then hands him tickets to the next game, and Calvin leaves, thrilled. Back at the group home, the kids dress nicely, hoping to impress potential adoptive parents. Calvin hopes this will be the day he finds a loving family, but no one picks him. Crushed, he joins his friends as Sister Teresa arrives with a donated jacket. When she hands it to Murph, a pair of old sneakers fall out. Calvin picks them up, intrigued. Sister Teresa mentions they once belonged to a famous basketball player as a child. Calvin notices the faded initials MJ and instantly believes they were Michael Jordan's. Before he can truly celebrate, Ox overhears the name and snatches the shoes, throwing them up onto an electrical wire. That night, during a heavy rainstorm, Calvin wakes up Murph and Reg. Together they sneak outside, and Calvin climbs a tree to retrieve the shoes. As he reaches them, a bolt of electricity surges through them. He falls, clutching the sneakers, as a strange, magical wave pulses through them. On game day, Calvin picks up the tickets Wagner gave him, but has to hand some over to Ox and his friends to keep them quiet. Inside the arena, they enjoy the game, even though the Knights struggle in the first half. During halftime, host Frank Bernard approaches Tracy Reynolds and asks him to meet a lucky fan to boost the team's popularity. Calvin's ticket is drawn, and he gets the once-in-a-lifetime chance to meet his idol. Ox tries to steal Calvin's moment, but Calvin outsmarts him and heads to the court. Frank tells Tracy to take it easy and not embarrass Calvin, but as soon as the kid sinks his first shot, things get interesting. Tracy begins to feel the pressure. After Calvin nails a third, jaw-dropping shot, the crowd goes wild, including the entire Knights bench. Coach Wagner and team rep Frank Bernard visit the group home and propose a deal to let Calvin play for the Knights. Since Biddleman is his legal guardian, they offer him money, and he agrees. Calvin returns, proudly telling his friends he beat an NBA player. While Ox watches with envy, Murph and Reg are skeptical. Calvin insists the sneakers must be magical and vows to protect them. That weekend, Calvin joins the team at the Staples Center. In the locker room, he meets Tracy, who brushes him off. Another teammate, John, gives Calvin a locker, and Bernard shows up with a team uniform and shoes. Calvin wants to wear his MJ sneakers, but Bernard tells him he's just there for show, not to play. Frustrated, Calvin confronts Coach Wagner, who confirms it. Calvin's only there to boost attendance. But during the game, the Knights are playing poorly. Coach Wagner calls a timeout, and Calvin suggests a new strategy. Intrigued, Wagner puts him in the game despite Frank's objections. But Calvin isn't wearing his magical sneakers, and he quickly loses confidence. He calls for a timeout and rushes to the locker room, puts on his MJ shoes, and returns with a bang. His incredible performance helps the Knights secure a win, and his 27 points earn him a real contract with the NBA. News spreads fast, and Calvin becomes an overnight sensation. At the group home, Calvin packs for his first road trip with the team. Biddleman joins him and warns that being in the NBA means he likely won't be adopted because Biddleman signed the contract as his guardian. Calvin is heartbroken, but the excitement of the trip keeps his spirits up. On the plane, Calvin is full of energy, while Tracy looks nervous. He's afraid of flying. Coach Wagner asks him to share a room with Calvin. Tracy protests, but eventually agrees. At the hotel, Calvin is amazed by the luxurious room. Later, as Tracy gets ready to go out with a woman named Jenny, Calvin begs to tag along. Tracy refuses and tells him to call room service instead. Shocked that food can be free, Calvin orders way too much and ends up groaning in pain on the floor. Tracy returns to find the mess and tries to clean it up before Jenny walks in. But when she sees Calvin, she's thrilled to meet him and forgets all about her date. She and Calvin hit it off, leaving Tracy frustrated. They then go to bed, and Calvin insists on saying his night prayers. Tracy, who is seemingly annoyed by Calvin, joins him for the prayers in a bid to get him to sleep. After the prayers, Calvin blesses his friends and asks Tracy if he had anyone he'd want to bless, but he says his parents are gone. They get to bed, and Calvin asks to have the lights on as he is afraid of the dark. He falls asleep and snores loudly, which makes it difficult for Tracy to sleep. The following day, Tracy seems sleep-deprived from all the snoring, but Calvin rats him out, saying that they had so much fun together with Jenny, and they even came back after midnight. Oblivious to Calvin, the rules forbid bringing girls to the room, and there is a midnight curfew. He puts Tracy in trouble by letting out all that information, and Coach Wagner gives him a warning, citing that he might get suspended if he does it again. Tracy gets furious with Calvin, and he apologizes profusely. As they warm up for the game, Calvin sees one of his favorite players and goes to ask for an autograph, but he brushes him off. John then prevents him from asking for the autograph, and the game begins. He outshines the player who denied him his autograph, and the Knights continue to win more games. More renowned players continue to look down on him, but he keeps surprising them. Frank then takes him to meet some reporters as he continues to gain popularity. He gets so much money that he is able to buy tricycles for all the kids at the home and buy expensive clothes similar to Tracy's. He plays more games and at some point has to finish his homework before the games begin. He keeps getting better and even beats seasoned players at the slam dunks to win the cup title. At the group home, Murph wonders how it's like to win all those games and interact with famous players. Calvin tells him about room service and says he's got everything he ever wanted, apart from having a family. Ox overhears the conversation, and out of jealousy, he tries to take Calvin's sneakers, saying they are the reason he is winning. This causes a commotion that wakes Biddleman up. He defends Calvin and orders all of them to go back to sleep. In the next scene, Calvin is playing computer games with John in a hotel room. Tracy says he was off to pick up some sleeping pills. Calvin Cambridge asks if he could join him, but he turns him down. John tells him not to take it personally because Tracy doesn't even talk to his own family. Calvin is shocked that Tracy has a family, yet he said he was an orphan. As Tracy is driving, he is surprised to see Calvin, who was hiding in the back seat. They enjoy some rap music together and dance as Tracy drives. Calvin then asks him why he said his dad was dead, yet he was alive. Tracy avoids the topic and refuses to answer Calvin, who wishes he had a father as well. They get to the store, and Tracy goes in to pick his order. At the counter, he is giving sleeping pills to take one each day and allergy pills to take 2 per day. As he flirts with the lady at the counter, he mistakenly takes 2 sleeping pills instead of 1. Calvin is also asking him to be quick, since it was almost curfew. He starts feeling sleepy immediately he takes the wheel, as an effect of the sleeping pills. With 6 minutes left to the curfew and Tracy completely asleep, Calvin resolves to take the wheel. The inexperienced Calvin drives dangerously, hitting some roadblocks, but eventually finds his way to the hotel. The following day, John tells Tracy that Calvin had been benched for breaching curfew, yet he only did that to protect him. In the plane, Tracy appreciates Calvin for covering for him. They then talk about their fears after Calvin refuses to sleep with the lights off. Tracy says that he is afraid of flying, but Calvin tells him that he was brave since he was in the plane, overcoming his fears. He asks Calvin to try and be brave as well, but he refuses to have the lights off. At the group home, Calvin and Reg are struggling with algebra when many parents arrive. Murph, who is seemingly envious, tells Calvin that all the parents were there to adopt him. Calvin wonders how that was possible, yet Biddleman had told him that he was his sole guardian. He confronts Biddleman, who then changes tune, saying that anyone looking to adopt him was only after his money. Calvin insists on meeting them, but Biddleman sets him up with the worst candidates. He then tells Calvin that his palace was at the group home under Biddleman's care. Calvin then goes to Tracy's house, and he is amused at how big and beautiful it is. He then opens up to Tracy about Biddleman using him, Murph being angry at him, and the geometry test he has. Tracy tells him to call Murph, and he goes outside to try and help with the geometry. Tracy paints his house walls with triangles relating geometry to basketball, which makes it easy for Calvin to understand. They then begin splashing paint at each other, and this leads to them having so much fun together. Murph arrives and joins in on the fun and games. In the next scene, reporters are talking about the chemistry between Tracy and Calvin after Tracy defends him in a match when an opponent tries to hurt him. The Knights continue to win more games, and they are left with one more win to the playoffs. Frank urges them to try their best since it is a very important game. At the group home, Calvin tells Murph and Reg that he has not found the perfect parents, and Murph points out that it was because in his heart, he wanted to be adopted by Tracy. He counters it, citing that Tracy was not so big on families, seeing that he doesn't even talk to his father. Calvin then looks for Tracy's father and takes him to meet Tracy, which greatly angers Tracy. In the next game, the Knights lose due to the animosity between Tracy and Calvin. Calvin goes to the group home and finds a wealthy family, the Boyds, waiting for him to adopt him. Tracy also seems disturbed by the fallout. Reports continue to insist on the need for Calvin and Tracy to synchronize, citing that the next game is a must-win for them. Biddleman then confronts Ox, inquiring whether it was true that the sneakers made Calvin play. After confirming it, Biddleman tricks Calvin into getting new shoes as he goes to meet the Boyds so that he can be adopted. Calvin asks Murph to take care of the shoes. Murph tries on the shoes to see if he'll play like Calvin, but he misses to shoot, an indication that it was not the shoes that were making Mike play. Ox then comes in with his friends, and Biddleman coerces him into telling him where the shoes were by partly burning Murph's mother's photograph. He gives in and tells Biddleman. At the Boyds, Calvin makes a huge mess at dinner, but it is overlooked since they want him to join the family. Biddleman goes to make a huge bet for the Raptors to beat the Knights. His confidence is inspired by knowing that he already had Calvin's shoes, thus the Knights were bound to lose. Calvin is then notified that he will become a Boyd once the papers are finalized the following day. He is, however, not as excited as he thinks about Tracy, who at the moment is also thinking about the time they spent together, and decides to go meet his dad. The next day, at the locker room, Tracy wants to tell Calvin that he had decided to adopt him when the Boyds interrupt. Calvin introduces them to Tracy, who seems heartbroken by the news. Reg and Murph then call Calvin and inform him that Biddleman had taken his MJ sneakers. Calvin rushes to the group home, which leads to the game starting without Calvin. As the game goes on and the Raptors beat the Knights, Calvin formulates a plan to tie Biddleman to his chair and force him to give back the sneakers. Ox comes and attempts to rescue Biddleman, but eventually turns against him and opens the safe, since he remembers the combination. The kids at the group home gear up and take their tricycles in a bid to help Calvin get back to his game in time. Biddleman unties himself and calls the sports brokers, informing them that Calvin had taken the sneakers. The brokers chase the kids down the road in an attempt to stop Calvin from getting to the game. The kids work together and manage to corner all the brokers, and Calvin gains entry to the Staples Center. He, however, finds Biddleman waiting for him, but hits him with the tricycle and manages to get to his game. He finds the Knights 21 points behind the Raptors. He helps the team recover and closes the gap to just 1 point. He is, however, tackled by the Raptors, which causes severe damage to his sneakers. Dejected, he refuses to play, citing that his strength was in his sneakers. But Tracy encourages him, citing that it was he that played and not the sneakers. They go back into the game, but Calvin seems to have lost confidence. Tracy encourages him, and he passes the ball to him, who then throws the winning shot. The Knights celebrate, joined by Calvin's friends and his new parents. At the changing room, he sadly says goodbye to Tracy and Coach Wagner. as he tells the Boyds to wait for him in the car. He rethinks his decision to join the Boyds in the empty arena and decides to go back to the group home. A few days later, Ox asks Calvin what the best part was in playing the NBA. Calvin tells him that it was room service, and Ox doesn't believe that it is possible to get free food. At that moment, Tracy shows up and teases him for choosing room service over the moments they shared. The Knights sponsor the Chesterfield group home and bring in new furniture. Tracy then tells Calvin that he wanted to adopt him. As they hug and celebrate, Calvin asks Tracy to take Murph as well. The movie ends with Murph and Calvin with Tracy in his mansion as his sons, and Calvin no longer afraid of the dark.